It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Howdy ho, hey, ha ha ha. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. Thank you for tuning in. Nice to have you here. Ron Placone is here today. Ron is a comedian, speaker, and radio internet personality. He's on the Young Turks Network, and he also has a syndicated radio show called Indie Bohemians. He is here, and actually we've got kind of a unique interview. We've got a two-part interview. The first part was recorded in October, and the second part was recorded on December 9th. The reason we have a two-part interview is because we started talking about the political election that was going on in October. And normally we don't talk about politics on this show, not because I'm not interested, but just because there are so many other radio shows that are doing political commentary that I just wanted to do something else. You know, there's enough of that covered. However, we got into a conversation about the election that was going on. And so I asked Ron to come back because we kind of needed a follow-up to the conversation now that the election was over, just to provide a little bit of closure or completion for the first part. So, without further ado, here is part one of Ron Placone. Okay, please welcome my guest, Ron Placone. Hi, Ron. How are you?
Hey, Doug. How you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Your bio is concise, I would say, as a word to use. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a little backstory about yourself, and then we can talk about your work.
Sure. And I guess thank you. I try to be short and sweet with those things. But yeah, I'm a comedian, and I also do a syndicated radio show / podcast called Indie Bohemians. And over on YouTube, I'm on the Young Turks Network. You know, because just trying to diversify all the platforms. So I do a segment for those guys, and then I do a segment called Thoughts, Rants, and Cold Coffee that is also nationally syndicated just on its own. And I kind of tour around the country. I do stand-up, and I speak at colleges. I have a speaking program on news and politics and the media called Battling Political Apathy. So it's a lecture, but it's kind of a fun satirical one, and I do a Q&A after. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Well, the speaking, you've got a lot of fodder for this election, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This has been one of the funniest ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, one of the funniest and most tragic at the same time.
Very true. Yeah, it's pathetic. And, I mean, there's so many different words you can use to describe this election. Pathetic, disgusting, unprofessional, you know, God, I hope it gets over with soon, you know, all those kinds of things.
Well, you know, I like to use revolutionary because I do think that this is the catalyst of a pretty big change in the way we do things. No matter who wins in November, you know, I kind of hope it's Hillary just because Trump is that much worse. But, you know, no matter who wins, hopefully this is the start of a change in the way we do things.
Well, change in what respect?
Well, here's my theory. And I know this is kind of, some people may agree, some people might not. But I think that this election season has made it glaringly clear to the public that the two-party system has left them behind. This does not represent the voting populace at all. That's why this is an unpopularity contest, and the two least popular candidates maybe ever in the history of elections in this country. Definitely within my lifetime. So one thing, the best thing that could happen from all this is that we get money out of politics once and for all. And I think that if Hillary wins, there's going to be some bipartisan support for that. And the reason I feel that way is because if the GOP loses, which that's the only reason the GOP doesn't like Donald Trump, it's because they think he might not win. That's the only reason. If Donald Trump wins, he'll give the GOP exactly what they want. He'll deregulate everything. And when it comes to social issues, like, oh, we want someone to set back women's rights. Donald Trump loves women. Just listen to his locker room banter. Well, don't worry about that. You got Mike Pence. Donald Trump will be a GOP wet dream. He will please them in every way. But if he loses, the GOP is going to be in a position where they're going to realize that they're falling apart, and they're going to realize we need to make sure a Donald Trump never happens to our party ever again. How can we do that? Well, one of the ways you can do that is publicly funded elections. And Hillary, man, wouldn't she like to have a feather in her cap, realizing that she helped get money out of politics. So when Chelsea runs, I didn't say if, I said when, because I'm being realistic here. When Chelsea runs, she'll be able to say, my mom helped get publicly funded elections. So I do think that you could see some bipartisan support for money out of politics. I'm not saying it's going to happen quick or right away, but it could be the start of that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the two-party system either. I think that there should be more voice for people that don't label themselves Democrat or Republican. There should just be candidate number 1, number 2, number 3, number 10, and vote based on issues rather than party affiliation.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I mean, I have nothing wrong with political parties. Like, it's fine. I mean, it's, just kind of an easier way to adopt a platform. But the two-party system, especially when you have, I mean, the way I see it, and, part of this are my own personal leanings, but you have the Republicans that are fringe right, and you have the Democrats that are center right. We have, I mean, out of the two-party system, neither one of them are necessarily all that progressive. You have people that try to, rock the cage, so to speak, like a Bernie Sanders. Right. But, the establishment combines against them. So really, this is what you're faced with. And you see people constantly trying to tie it up and put a bow on it. But I think a lot of us are tired of that. A lot of us are saying, no, we deserve more choices. And I'd like to see the Green Party get some legitimate backing, and I'd like to see the Libertarian Party get some legitimate backing. Those seem to be the four parties in this country. So I say we should have it. Most other democracies have more than two choices. I think it's our time. Let's have four. Let's have the Libertarians, the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Green Party.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, maybe even more parties than that. The reason that it's really important that we need more than just the two old traditional parties in this country is because America has turned into a very diverse melting pot. This is not the America of the 1950s and 1960s. That's long gone. And in order to get representation equally to all of the different types of people in this country, we're going to need more. We're going to need more of, I don't like to use the word diversity because that kind of brings up other issues that people sometimes get nasty about. But we do need something other than, choice red or choice blue. And particularly if we're going to move forward as a country. We still have this kind of a painting that we are making for the rest of the world on one hand, saying, look at us, we are the melting pot of the world. This is the example of what all of you people should be doing. But at the same time, people can point out that it's not necessarily working. We do have our problems. We do have issues. And it's no good being a hypocrite because people will just laugh at you. So in order to sustain, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like piggybacking on that, in terms of diversity in a melting pot. I'm a pretty progressive guy. I mean, I make no qualms about it. Anyone that kind of talks to me, it's pretty obvious I kind of fall to the left. Some people are further left than me. Some people are not. But I think that the general person, at least for the most part, most of the people in this country, they do want everybody to have access to healthcare. They do want education to be affordable for people to not go in debt for the rest of their lives to get a higher education. They do want living wages. There's no reason in a country with the amount of wealth that we have, anybody that works 40 hours a week at an honest job doesn't make enough money to survive. That's inexcusable. It shouldn't happen, especially when you have wage gaps between CEOs and the general worker of 475 to 1. I think the general public doesn't want that. We don't have capitalism. We have predatory capitalism. There is a huge difference. We have the latter. And the general public, they just do not want that. But they have these choices that kind of represent A or A light, and they have to pick within them. And the status quo just simply isn't working anymore. It's not working in terms of diversity, in terms of the young people that are faced with not the most ideal economic situation. It's not working for it's just not working for most people. I mean, the 99 and the 1%, that's a real thing that's going on. And we need to change the way we do things. And technology has given us a beautiful situation where we don't need money in politics anymore. It's not necessary. You can get a message out there, and if you have a strong enough message, the grassroots will help you. Look at Bernie Sanders. Didn't take any corporate money, and he went up against possibly the most corporate Democrat ever in the history of the party. And that's not necessarily a bash on Hillary. That's just the truth. And he almost won the primary. He showed up to a gunfight with a butter knife and almost won the gunfight. That's pretty impressive. That was a heck of a butter knife.
Yes, I was very surprised how well he did and how much run for the money he gave Hillary. Because, let's face it, the guy didn't come off as, slick and glamorous. He came off as kind of a crotchety old man. But his message was very good, and people listened to him. And I was really surprised how well he did. Trump, I wasn't surprised. Trump, a lot of people thought, he'll never make it past the primary. But he had something that I think a lot of Americans wanted to hear. People were kind of tired of the political correctness. People were tired of this. People not saying what's actually going on. But now what's happened is that the word humility has not entered into his vocabulary at all. And unfortunately, I think presidents need to have a certain understanding of humility, because you can't be the bull in a china shop in the world today. There's just no way. We could have done it 300 years ago, 100 years ago even. But after World War II, now that we are the world police, we need to set an example for the rest of the world, not sort of, our way or the highway. That isn't the example we really want to set for the world. And unfortunately, I think he just went way off the deep end with his campaign. So I don't know.
Well, I think he was always off the deep end. I mean, this is a guy, Donald Trump does not want the job. He does not want to be president. He wants a chapter in his memoir. He is a megalomaniac. He is a by-the-book sociopath. I mean, that is just, you read the DSM manual for a few minutes. That's what he is. And he is just, he's basically the Frankenstein of the GOP, really. And they invested in a bunch of blank suits that couldn't beat him because he was talking the way he was talking, and he was kind of calling these people out, and they weren't used to that. So Marco Rubio folded, Chris Christie folded, Jeb Bush folded. John Kasich, if they would have gotten behind him, he would be the nominee, and John Kasich would be our next president. I guarantee you, in a general election, if he had the right people behind him, that guy would beat Hillary Clinton, because he would get Ohio, and he would get Pennsylvania, and he would get Florida. Why the GOP establishment, and I'm glad they didn't, but why the GOP establishment didn't get behind that guy, I do not understand. I have no idea why they did not get behind that guy. And, some of my friends that are Republicans, but are, of the reasonable ilk, they're more libertarian leaning than Republican usually, but they say that same thing. They're like, I have no idea why we didn't get behind John Kasich. But Trump is the whole political correct thing. I'll never understand that. I can only imagine how much privilege people have to come from if the biggest problem they see in this country is that they can't marginalize other groups of people without consequence. I don't understand that. Like, what's the big problem in the United States right now? It's 2 PC. Really? That a blogger is the biggest hold on your day? That there's people that broke their arm and now they're bankrupt, and that's what's bothering you? That's your issue? Or people that brown people that aren't documented, that aren't bothering you at all and have families, that's the biggest issue. I'm not saying, I'm not saying undocumented immigration isn't an issue. I understand that it is, but that's the biggest problem. That's what it means to take care of other Americans. It means to ship people out of here, to be totally nationalistic and xenophobic about it, instead of going a more compassionate direction. Like, that's the big... I don't understand that white picket fence of privilege, that you think that's the biggest thing going on in this country. I don't understand it.
Well, there are certainly bigger issues in this country and the world than something like that. However, there is a certain level of experimentation that's been going on with this country since its inception. And I think that it's nice if we can all join hands and sing Kumbaya. However, I don't think we as a human race are there yet. I think there are select people that are there, but I don't think we as a human race are there. If you compare the United States to all the other countries in the world, we have some political ideologies and theories that are way beyond the capacity of other countries. And maybe not everybody in this country has caught up to that level of thinking yet. And I think that's where the political correct debate gets, because people just aren't there yet. The technology has gone so fast. I mean, if I want to use technology as a sort of an analogy to politics, the technology has gone so fast that people just couldn't catch up to it. And I think that people are going to hold on. That's kind of typical of human nature. People will hold on to things that they feel safe. And let's face it, if you look at any TV show that was on in the 1960s and the 1970s, they were racist. By our standards today, they were racist. And yet it was acceptable. That was what people laughed at. That's what people thought was funny. Okay? That changed. And some people still think it's funny. So I'm not making an excuse for it. What I'm doing is merely suggesting that there is a reason for it. I've been traveling around the world. I've been to many other countries. And believe me, they are far less PC than we are. So, we are quite a bit more advanced in that department than most other countries. I think that someday we're going to get there. You remember Star Trek? Someday we'll get to that point. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime or not.
No, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, sometimes it's like, but I mean, that's just kind of a result of the postmodern society we find ourselves in, where anybody with an internet connection can contribute and can make their voice be heard. I mean, there's going to be some cyclical effects of that. We both do comedy. We've both seen it where someone will take a joke completely out of context and, have this faux outrage on their blog or whatever. And then it becomes this big thing when really it's like, well, you actually completely took that out of context. That stuff happens. And I totally get how that is annoying and that is counterproductive. But as far as that's some huge issue that should be front and center of a platform, that's absolutely ridiculous. And in terms of this election, it's nothing more than a straw man. Donald Trump's saying what people are thinking. He is? What people? Your racist uncle while he's drunk? Maybe that guy. I don't think anybody else.
Well, certainly somebody bought into him, because he did come from zero right to the second choice on the ballot, to the surprise of most people in this country.
I don't think he came from zero. I think he came from a lot, but I see what you're saying.
Nobody took him seriously as a candidate when he started out. Nobody. The liberals, the conservatives, nobody. So it's the guy that comes from behind. It's like the horse race. The one that, it's 100-1 and comes from behind and just blows away all the other horses in the track. Granted, the Republicans had, what did you say, empty suits
Blank suits.
Blank suits. Yeah.
Not a phrase I invented. I can't take credit.
But I mean, that's true. Those guys were just wet blankets, every single one of them. You know, Bible in one hand, gun in the other hand type. And, you know, those people, those aren't the people around anymore. You know, you've got millennials who might want to call themselves Republicans, but they can't relate to that. First of all, I don't think anyone in this country should be running on a religious platform. As far as I'm concerned, that goes against the Constitution. You know,
It does.
That just needs to be taken out of the equation. And that one's dying a very tough death in this country. So when you had all these people coming up about when gay marriage became the law of the land, and people saying, well, I don't agree with it because it goes against my religion, that's okay. You can disagree with it if it goes against your religion. You don't have to marry somebody who is the same sex as you. But again, it's like you said with the PC thing. How in the hell is my gay neighbor getting married to a man going to affect my life? You know, It just isn't. I think people need to pick and choose their battles a little bit, because that one hurt the empty suits, because a couple of them, that was their single issue when they went up and talked. Hi, how you doing? Boy, am I against gay marriage. You know, It was like that. And it's like, oh, come on. Give me a break.
Yeah, again, I don't understand. And again, I can't relate to your biggest issue is your ability to marginalize others. Like, I mean, because really, that's all that is. Like, what's the biggest issue in this country? Well, I can't discriminate against gay people as much as I would like to.
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how messed up that sounds? Do you have any idea how bizarre and straight up creepy that is? And just hateful? I mean, it's such a dated platform. Because like you said, I mean, a lot of the younger, especially millennials that may want to relate to Republicanism, they're socially, they're pretty much live and let live. Yeah, like, gay person's not bothering me. They can do whatever they want. And then fiscally, maybe they're a little more conservative. That's pretty much where that party is as far as the people in it. But yet you have these fringe religious right candidates that they still think are electable. And again, this goes to speak to the two-party system being broken.
Right.
Ever since Reagan, the party shifted dangerously to the right. And what the Democrats did was follow them to the right. So they just kept shifting to the right, never went the other way. It was a very one-sided hokey pokey. And now we got what we got, which is a two-party structure that does not represent most of the people on both sides of the aisle, quite frankly, that live in this country.
Yeah.
Yet we're given these options that we have to, lesser of two evils, let's tie it up and put a bow on it. And we let it get out of hand. So I say, it's time to stop doing that. And I think that this presidential election is going to be the necessary wake-up call. Because real change doesn't happen until you reach a point of crisis. And, I mean, look at one of our debates. We've reached a point of crisis. You talk about other countries in the world, and, as far as, like, our PC level compared to theirs, I don't really know one way or the other. I've been to a couple different countries myself. That's kind of a tough barometer for me to gauge. But, I mean, I will say this. A lot of my friends in England, in Canada, they say, look, we look at your debates and we are laughing at you guys. This is like Idiocracy has turned into a documentary. This is embarrassing. And it is. And in a lot of other countries, because a Donald Trump-esque candidate is not unique to the United States. And anyone that says it is, that's not true. But a lot of those types of candidates in other countries, they are unmasked right away. What I mean by that is they are called out for what they are. If they are an anti-Semite, they are identified as such. And then the people that support them do that unapologetically so. Donald Trump is a racist. I'm sorry. You want to tie it up and put a bow on it? Go ahead. He is a racist. Or he is at least so tragically ignorant, which is very possible considering the privilege he grew up with. He is so tragically ignorant that he doesn't realize the danger of what he says. Those candidates are unmasked. If we were in a different country, if we were in Canada, if we were in England, Donald Trump would be labeled a racist by every media outlet. Instead, we skate around it, we tie it up, and we put a bow on it. There are some outlets here that will straight up use that verbiage for him, and it is deserved. Because if that's objectively what it is, it should be designated as such.
Well, again, it could go back to our PC culture that we just don't want to call anybody anything.
I think you're right, yeah. I mean, I think there is kind of like a paradox. I mean, eventually it goes full circle, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The one person that I did want to mention, and then let's talk about your show. I'm originally from Boston. I live in Vegas now. But Governor Weld was probably the best governor that Massachusetts ever had. And he disappeared for a long time. I thought he was dead. And all of a sudden he resurfaces on the, they're the Libertarian, right? Weld and Johnson.
Johnson, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Weld, he was a Republican when he was governor of Massachusetts. And he was exactly the type of Republican that the Republicans need. He's socially liberal. He's fiscally conservative. He's intelligent. He's rational. And he's a gentleman. And I don't know why he never pursued politics. Once he finished with governor of Massachusetts, he disappeared off the planet. And
well, a lot of moderate Republicans kind of got pushed out. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, like, and I think a lot of that is just Reagan to Bush 1 and stuff like that in that whole era. And then the whole New American Century neocon thing. They kind of shoved moderate Republic, which, you know, the way you're describing him, and I'm not familiar with when he was in Massachusetts. That was, you know, before my time, but you know, it sounds like he fits that description, and I think a lot of folks like him, they did find their way to libertarianism or something like it.
Yeah, it's too bad. Anyways, let's cut this off now, and let's talk about your podcast, Indie Bohemians. Tell me a little bit about it. Tell me what your show is about.
It started off as a morning show. I used to live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've always loved radio. Radio's always been a big part of what I do. I was really involved with the non-commercial radio community in Nashville. I did a weekly show, and it was just, you know, kind of just a labor of love, really. And the LPFM, which means low power FM for anyone, basically it means a small radio station. And if you're a radio geek, you know it means a lot more than that. But you know, whatever, for all intents and purposes. And they acquired a second signal that was going to put them all over the city of Nashville. So we kind of got together and we were like, what would be a really cool way to really establish this as a bigger thing? And we thought that it'd be a great idea to kind of have a flagship morning show. And me and the other co-hosts thought of the name Indie Bohemians. We just thought that was a goofy, fun name that's kind of self-deprecating, kind of, you know, tongue-in-cheek, but makes it clear that we're just a goofy, you know, lefty talk show that's going to have on musicians and artists and actors and comedians and whatever else, radical academics, you name it, you know, and that was just the concept. But as time progressed, it became a lot to really try to build that thing from the ground up. Especially when, in the meantime, you were running into every problem that a budding new radio station runs into, and we had no corporate help whatsoever. We were just completely on our own, which used to be feasible prior to 1996, but now that's quite an undertaking, unless you got pretty deep pockets, which we did not have. So the project just became too much to have. Especially since I was on the road at the time, so I was out of town a lot too, so it was really a lot of back and forth. So it just eventually sort of just became a weekly talk show that I kind of just took over. And yeah, we're in about 10 states now, I think 11 states now. And the podcast does pretty okay. It's really popular on disinformation.com. And that's pretty much what it is. I've interviewed musicians. I've had Billy Bragg on the show before. The slogan I use these days is punk rock, puns, and politics. Because, you know, I'm really into music and I like a lot of punk rock music. But I also like a lot of other stuff, but it's all kind of connected. And I've had Billy Gardell on the show. I've had Billy Bragg. I've had Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull.
Oh, wow.
I've had Oh, geez. Trying to think of some of the... Eugene Merman's done the show before. TJ Miller's done the show before. I've had... Trying to think of some of the noteworthy, there's a lot of people that, a lot of folks have never heard of that are doing some brilliant things. I had this one author on. He wrote a book, and this goes into politics again, but every presidential election, there are actually, on average, about 500 people that run for president, technically. They, fill out the forms and they technically run for president. None of them ever poll high enough to get on the ballot, but it is something they actually do. This election season, there were 1,500. And this guy drove around the country and wrote a book about some of those 1,500. And one of the things, there was this one group of guys, they nominated a woman's buttocks. I forget her, but it was her voluptuous buttocks, and he never got to see the woman or her buttocks. I asked him, I was like, well, did it live up to the hype? Would you elect this butt president? And he did not get to meet her, nor does he know if she's actually a real person. But someone nominated a buttocks, and he just went around the country interviewing these people. And we talked about his book on the show. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's that type of a show. It's kind of a weird, quirky talk show. It's a lot of fun. If you like beatnik, if you like radical thinking, if you like political humor, if you like punk rock, if you like just general banter, you check it out. It might be for you.
And where can people check it out?
iTunes, Indie Bohemians. You can find it on iTunes. And our Facebook page, which is just Indie Bohemians on Facebook. You can find out all of our streaming info for all of our affiliates if you would want to just kind of stream it online the traditional way. The only difference between the radio show and the podcast, the radio show has music breaks, the podcast does not. But yeah, Indie Bohemians on iTunes, on Spreaker, on iHeartRadio, pretty much any platform that you get podcast or content. I think we're pretty much on most, if not all of them. And Podomatic is our home server, so Indie Bohemians on Podomatic as well. And yeah, that's where you can find that. Or my website, which is just ronplacone.com. Has streaming to all that stuff.
And that's spelled Placone.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ron, thank you very much for coming on the show. Best of luck with all of your endeavors. What the Young Turks Network I've heard of? What is that on?
That's on YouTube. The Young Turks, I mean, the main show, of course, is The Young Turks with Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. And they have a network of affiliated partners, which I'm very lucky to be part of. And you can check that out on YouTube. You can check out the main show. You can also check out all of the network partners that I collaborate with on a regular basis. Jimmy Dore, TYT Nation. You can see my face on all that stuff. And you can subscribe to my channel as well, which has a lot of the same segments that are on the podcast. If you prefer to see my smiling face, you can go the YouTube route.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. This was very enlightening. And it's something that I don't normally do, because when I started this show about a year ago, I said, well, the two topics that I'm not going to ever get into are religion and politics. So we blew the first one, or the second one, I should say.
Yeah, we kind of did them both, man. I'm really sorry.
A little bit.
I feel like I sabotaged you. I didn't mean to.
It's okay. In fact, it felt good. It's kind of like one of those things where you want to talk about it, but you just figured you better not. No, I'm glad we did. So it'll be a unique show for people who normally
Well, if you didn't feel good about it, I was just going to blame Skype. I was just going to use that. I was having login issues, and the filter just went goodbye. I'm sorry.
I lost my temper, so I went into politics. Yeah. Okay.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Okay, please welcome back to the show, Ron Placone. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Hey, Douglas. How are you doing?
Oh, doing just fine. Thank you for coming back. I wanted to have you back on because the interview that we did several weeks ago, I guess it's close to a month ago now.
Yeah, it was a little while ago.
Yeah, it was a good interview, but I felt we really needed a follow-up because of this extraordinary election that we finished up, and just kind of wanted to get your take on it and kind of do a part 2 of our previous interview, which is something that I haven't done before on the show. So it's a new thing for the show, as well as just, I think, gives the interview some closure, if you will, if that's the right word. But
Sure, yeah. I mean, closure is one way to describe things. Extraordinary is one way to describe what happened on November 8th. So I don't remember all the stuff we talked about exactly, but I can say pretty confidently I was likely wrong about a number of things because I was not expecting Trump to win the election, which, I mean, he actually did lose the popular vote by a significant margin, but, you know, that's not the system we have. So he is the winner, at least as of right now, unless something pretty extraordinary comes to the surface. He will be our president-elect. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. Needless to say, I'm pretty disappointed. I was never a Hillary fan. I'm still not. And I think that in the aftermath of all this, you know, we're almost still dealing with a lot of the Clinton hubris because I think that the fingers have been pointed everywhere except for at that campaign, and that campaign deserves a large portion of the blame. And I think the Democratic Party deserves a large portion of the blame. Were there other factors? Of course there were. A lot of them, as a matter of fact. But since it's happened, the fact that the Democrats are going to keep going down a dead-end path. I mean, Nancy Pelosi just said, I think it was yesterday or a couple days ago, that the Democrats don't plan on changing direction. They don't plan on taking a new course. They're going to just continue with these failed neoliberal approaches that have left a lot of people disenfranchised, and in particularly working class people in swing states that voted for Trump over another neoliberal. That's saying something. That's saying something about the future of this country. And now that we have Trump, we're in for quite a ride. But if history is going to repeat itself, one thing that we're going to see is a huge rise in labor, and because that's what happened, in the 30s. So if that happens, the Democratic Party either needs to get on board or get the hell out of the way, because Donald Trump does not speak for the majority of this country. Neither major political party, in my humble opinion, speaks for a lot of this country. More people are aware that the system is completely broken, from the way our elections are bought and sold, to the Electoral College, to corruption from within the organizations. And I think a lot of people are mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore, to quote the movie Network.
Or the Twisted Sister song.
Is that exactly what they say? I can't remember.
Yeah, we're not gonna take it.
Yeah. They don't say the mad as hell part, though, do they? That's not in the song. Maybe it is.
I can't remember all the lyrics. I just remember that part. And it started out with that great banging drum. I actually liked the first, 30 seconds of that song, and then it just got monotonous because it didn't change. It just went over and over and over, that chorus. But, that was the basic line of it. Well, okay, going back to what you're saying, the one question I have two, actually. The first one is, I wasn't really surprised that Trump won, although I think in our previous interview, we had both speculated that Hillary would win, although mine was kind of a real not confident yes. It was kind of, I think she might win. But what I was really surprised about wasn't so much that he won, but that almost everybody got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There was only one, all those polls that were online, everybody had their poll. And the only one that consistently said Trump is ahead by a couple of points was the LA Times poll. And people thought they were nuts because all the other polls said, oh, Hillary's ahead by 3%. This one's she was ahead on every single poll. I think that certainly her and her people were so confident going into this election. It's like she probably went to bed,
Oh, she definitely did. I mean, and I was more confident that she was going to win just because I thought, and again, I'm sure this was pretty apparent in the first interview. I was not a Hillary fan. I was a Bernie guy. And I never was. I mean, I didn't support her in 2008. And I think the reason she didn't get the nod at 2008, I mean, kind of looking back at all this stuff, people were tired of the neoliberal thing then. They were tired of the Clinton dynasty,
right.
Centrist, corporatist Democrats. They wanted something different. Not that Obama was much of a deviation from that. But he was somewhat of a deviation, and he certainly, was one of the probably the most effective president of my lifetime, although that's not saying a whole lot, and then, so we went backwards. We really did. But I just thought that Trump was just such a self-sabotage guy and was just causing such disarray amidst voters in the media and just amidst his own party. The Democratic Party in many ways has proven that there is not any organization ever, at least not to my knowledge, that is better at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And both major political parties are a mess right now.
Oh, yeah.
But the Democrats are an even bigger mess than the Republicans, which is hard to even wrap one's head around. And if they don't change course, things are going to get pretty bad. I mean, they already have. I mean, he's appointed somebody who's against the minimum wage to head up labor. He's appointed a climate change denier and fracking profiteer to the EPA. Donald Trump's concept of success is warped to the general person, meaning he thinks that if you exploit something, that means you're successful at it. Let's put it this way. There's a lot of blues artists, right? And they wrote a lot of the amazing rock and roll songs that we know and love. They wrote That's All Right Mama, a lot of tunes. And a lot of those guys, because of media moguls in the music industry, they never got a dime for the songs that they wrote. And a lot of them had to work on a plantation until the day they died. Donald Trump, if he was running a music company, he would appoint those moguls that didn't pay those songwriters, he would appoint them to distribute royalty checks.
Okay.
Because exploitation is success in his mind.
Yeah, that's a complicated theory to get around because
not really.
Well, it is not to say that I'm disagreeing with you saying that he's that, but I'm saying that the whole country is sort of based like that. That was the foundation of this country, was exploitation. We exploited from the time we set foot on this soil. And that's what's made this country great, if you want to call us great. We've always been that. We've always been explorers. We've always been, let's find new ways to do this. Let's take that. The people that got very rich had thousands and thousands of people working for slave labor, first of all. And then after that, the people working in the steel mills and the coal mines and the railroads were paid barely a living wage in those days. So, I mean, we've had that. That's capitalism. That's what it's about.
Well, that's predatory capitalism.
Well, there's kind of a fine line. I mean, there's a fine line between sort of idealistic liberalism and communism.
Sure.
Because anybody who is successful. See, one thing about America, let me just back up a little bit. America is a country of individuals. We are not a collective country. And I think this is showing as we get more diverse. Okay? It is very, very difficult to get all of the people in the United States, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Jew, Christian, Muslims, get them to agree on one thing. Get them all to agree on one thing. Good luck. Okay?
Mm-mm.
But
yeah, I don't disagree with any of what you're saying.
okay, but the one thing that I bet you could get all of them to agree on is this concept of individual liberty and personal freedom. If you asked any of them, do you think that you should have your personal freedoms and individual liberties? I bet you most of them would say yes.
Yeah, and that means different things to different people.
Right. So going all the way back to what you were saying at the beginning, Donald Trump may not have been the candidate for the majority of the people, but how does one find a candidate for the majority of the United States? It's incredibly difficult now. I don't think we're ever going to see a landslide election like there was in 1980 because this country is so much more diverse than it was then. In 1980, Reagan took like every freaking state except for about 3.
Right.
And, you know, I don't think we're going to see that kind of a landslide ever again because look at the red and blue map of this election. That pretty much was the map for the last 5 elections. Okay, give or take a state here or there, which rightly are called the swing states because those are the ones that are deciding the election now. I don't know. I think both parties have got their work cut out for them. What we need to find is someone down the middle who comes off intelligent and articulate and quite honestly has a bit of class. Trump has a lot of money. I don't think he has any class at all. He's sort of the proverbial pig in the silk shirt. He offended a lot of people. A lot of people.
Mm-hmm. No, and he's going to continue to. I mean, this guy is a professional Twitter troll. He doesn't even plan on suspending his reality TV excursions. I mean, this is idiocracy turned into a documentary. And I mean, certainly a lot of the principles you bring up, that is true. And there's actually a lot of the stuff you were talking about. If you haven't seen it yet, you should see a BBC documentary called The Power of Nightmares, which kind of goes to that individualism of America. It's all about that. And you definitely have a very valid point there. A lot of other countries, a lot of other democratic experiments around the world don't have that principle to the extent that we do. So that is I don't know if stigma is the right word, but that is something that you're dealing with when you go about American politics, and it's reflected in our politics. And I can accept that, even though there's a lot of ways with that mode of thinking that I am on the other side of. However, I don't think that what we need now is more middle-of-the-road pandering. I think, first of all, I don't think that either major candidate represented the majority of Americans. I do think this country is far more progressive than it's given credit for. And, you know, I'd like to think this isn't me in my little bubble. I'd like to think this is just you know, most Americans don't want to go in debt to go to college. Most Americans don't want to see them or their neighbor go bankrupt because they break their arm. Most Americans like the idea of making healthcare more affordable. Most Americans like the idea of college being affordable. They like the idea of anybody working 40 hours a week at an honest job gets paid enough money to live. These are all principles that most people would agree on as well. We just have different theories on how to best get there. And a lot of that is because of propaganda that people have eaten up. You know, I mean, the working class did not feel confident in Hillary Clinton, or at least a lot of them. So they bought snake oil from Donald Trump. And eventually they're going to realize it's snake oil.
Well, it was a different brand of snake oil. I'm not convinced she wasn't selling snake oil either. It might have just
She wasn't selling any oil. She was selling no oil.
Okay. All right. You want to use that analogy? I'll agree with that. But the one thing that about her that aside from the politics, because I'm still a little bit of the opinion that Americans vote based on the person less than the issues. And whatever you want to say about Trump, he did come off extremely confident. You know, cocky, arrogant, whatever, egomaniac, whatever adjective you want to use. He came off very confident. He never gave you one moment of doubt that he wasn't going to win. Okay? Now, neither did Hillary. The difference is that Hillary is one of those things, I'll call her the thing that wouldn't leave. All right? She is like a fixture in Washington, or was. And I think, quite honestly, people just simply were tired of seeing her. Tired of seeing her face. Tired of seeing Bill. That whole family was like the poster child for the Washington establishment of the Democratic Party, as the Bushes are to the Republican Party. Now, you see obviously how much Jeb, how many votes he got. What did he get, 3 votes? Something like that. So I think she was just the same thing on the other side of the coin. People were just sick of her. She had been in Washington for over 20 years as one thing or another. She essentially was the same candidate as Nixon was in 1968. He wasn't well liked in 68, but the Democrats didn't put anybody better up. You know, Bobby Kennedy got shot. Well, Nixon wouldn't have even run if Kennedy hadn't been shot. Johnson decided not to run. All of these things sort of fell into place before Nixon even decided he was going to run. So who did they put up? They put up Hubert Humphrey, who was like this kind of whiny little, that just didn't have the big political machine behind him. And Nixon appealed to the same people that Trump got. Okay. But again, Nixon was not popular. You know, people said, oh God, he's around now again. He got a little further than Hillary did in the 1960 election. I mean, he damn near won. But again, he was another repeat player. We kind of like fresh faces in this country. When we change presidents, we want somebody new. And Hillary did not come off as new. She came off as, oh, that old broad again.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that, and there's a lot of reasons why she was a very unpopular candidate. Let's keep in mind, though, she did win the popular vote by over 2 million votes. She won the popular vote by a very wide margin. This is the second time in less than 20 years the popular vote winner did not get into the White House due to an archaic system that, in my opinion, we need to abolish.
You think we need to abolish the Electoral College?
Absolutely. That's an issue for a different day. It's not going to happen anytime soon. But yes, we do need to abolish the Electoral College. I understand the arguments for keeping it. I don't think they're not without some merit. However, they are pale in the comparison of one person, one vote.
Okay, I would sort of half agree with you. I mean, the whole point of the Electoral College, if it wasn't there, California and New York would decide every presidential election.
Yeah, see, they say that, but I don't understand how that's actually the case. They're like, oh, well, they would prioritize some states over others. They already do that.
No, it's because those are the population centers. If you're going strictly by population.
It's still one person, one vote. It's still one person, one vote. So you know what? If you're a Republican in California, which I know some Republicans in California, they never show up for the presidential election because they feel like, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, guess what? Your vote does matter now because you get one vote. One person, one vote. Popular vote winner takes the election.
Well, you know,
you can't ignore you can't ignore the Midwest in that system. Any politician that does, good luck winning.
Well, no, the point is that let's say there's 30 million people living in California. And to get 30 million votes, you'd have to take most of the Midwest. You'd have to take half of the South. So all of those people would have to be on the same boat in order to beat California. And this was the whole point of the Electoral College. It wasn't set up by accident. It was set up because they wanted to make sure that this country did not come under mob rule. That was the theory behind it. Because the big population centers would always control the election. So they split it up so that everybody got a few votes, depending, you know what I mean? They took it down.
No, that's an incomplete analysis. It can actually be traced back to, it has roots in slavery. It has archaic roots that was about controlling power. And I understand some of the arguments for it. Like I said, the stuff that you're saying is not without merit. But again, it pales in comparison to one person, one vote.
All right. I'm not convinced it would work, but okay. We'll leave that one on the table.
Well, we have less than half the people turning up to vote in this country. Our voter turnout is terrible. There is constant voter suppression. There is election fraud on a regular basis. The system is not working. Not only do I favor getting rid of the Electoral College, I also favor different voting methods as well. I don't like the way, I just don't think it's effective the way we run our elections anymore. There's different theories out there. There's, I believe, something called approval voting, where you can cast a vote for more than one choice. There is ranked choice voting. And another thing that I strongly favor, and again, everything we're talking about here, Doug, these are not things that are going to happen tomorrow or even within the next 4 to 8 years. We're talking principles someday down the road, maybe. But I also favor publicly funding all elections, and getting money out of politics completely. Those are other ideas that I am in favor of to have a better democratic process.
Well, I'm in favor of online voting. I think that would significantly increase voter turnout if people didn't have to leave their house and stand in line for hours to vote. I think
I can't go with you on that just because of hacking and the amount of fraud that would probably occur in a system like that.
Well, it couldn't be any worse than what it is now, and people move billions of dollars a day online. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about internet security, there are very secure portals that they could install for people to vote. I don't see it any different than, online banking. Your money is there.
Maybe. But how often do people's bank accounts get hacked? It happens to almost everybody at some point. Happened to me once. Stuff like that happens every day.
But I'm just saying that theoretically, we could make a strong security system for voting. Similarly, it's not like you said, it's not without fraud as it is currently.
Certainly. No, it's, I just think it, yeah. If they unveiled it next year, I think I'd be opposed to it just because of those concerns. But someday, we might be there.
Or mail-in ballots, which I think they do now.
Mm-hmm.
Even that. Anything to make it easier for people to vote, I would be in favor of, simply because it would increase the turnout. What did you say? It was like 50% of this country?
Yeah, I believe it was
votes?
about 49% of people that showed up to vote.
Yeah, that's too low.
Yeah,
that's too low.
I fully
because
agree
then,
with you.
If you think about the popular vote, that other 50% could sway the election.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think definitely people need to get out and vote. Thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate it. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I had a good time.
Sorry that the election didn't go as grandly as we didn't think it would. That's kind of a strange statement, but...
Well, there's reasons for optimism. First of all, when you see bleak political times, it causes an awakening. And I think we're going to have, over the next 4 years, I think, and it's already happening, we're going to have a huge awakening amidst young people, amidst just people in general. And I think hopefully it causes us to kind of talk more, and to kind of seek better solutions together. I do think that that's going to happen. I do think that's already happening. And, on the state level, we did some kind of okay things here where I live in California. We had some pretty cool things happen at the state level.
Yeah, marijuana's legal now, isn't it?
That's one of them. Yeah. We have that. We also, put some pressure on overturning Citizens United. So there were some victories at the state level. Ranked choice voting was passed in Maine. So people are getting a little agitated, and they're starting to take practical means for change. So I do think that's one piece of optimism to kind of take away from all this. You just hope that in the meantime, the world is left standing. But I think it will.
All right. Well, take care, Ron. And again, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Ron Placone. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.